All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, in part one here, we've got two topics. The not so fun one is we talked about this Stanford paper on effects of mRNA vaccines versus infection, and there's a lot to talk about there. This is going to be a multi-part kind of section because I'm only on page 7 of this 31-page paper because it is a dense freaking read. We're going to do, I wanted to start with kind of so we'll do that second. I don't think that's going to take too long, but I say it's not going to take too long, but me and someone else who is very intelligent and used to writing and reading papers spent an hour last night analyzing one sentence in this 31-page paper. So we'll get to that. But I wanted to start with something a little bit more fun. I got some feedback. I've been talking to people privately that follow our podcast, and some of the things we talk about in our Wheel of Time stuff are actually legitimate good topics to talk about in the regular ones. They haven't read the books. They're no interest in reading them. Not really fantasy novel type people, but we do talk about a lot of real world kind of philosophical, psychological topics, right? Yeah. So and what we got into last time, we were talking about the difference between Matt and Perrin,
right,
and the brain hemispheres. And in discussions with this person, because we talk a lot of psychology and philosophy, we've been talking about brain hemispheres and ways of thinking. And part of it sparked from I got her reading Jonathan Haidt's work, and there's a difference. And I meant to have that book down here with me, so I'm going to kind of off the cuff. So if it's going to be paraphrasing at this point, I'm not going to read it directly. But difference is, so if you're left hemisphere, which is most people in this world, left hemisphere, you tend to be a little bit more positive in your thinking, and if you're right hemisphere, you tend to be more negative in your thinking. And we're talking about Matt and Perrin, and left brain more structured, everything is planned out, and the plan a lot of time works because if you're very intricate about it. And where you got Matt, who was right-brained, he kind of plans for things to not go right. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about with this was the left brain tends to be more positive in their thinking. The right brain tends to be more negative in their thinking. And I kind of wanted to tease that out a little bit, because why? So let me get your thoughts on that, and then I'll go down the rabbit hole I went down for the last probably 2 weeks on this subject.
I had never heard that before about left and right, about the positivity. I was not aware of that, but it makes sense.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to kind of get your off the cuff reaction, because if you kind of come to the same conclusion, then it's kind of a little bit it blends the science with just the common sense realm.
Well, I think the standard layperson's analysis of left and right brain, what we tend to know is that right is more creative, left is more logical and structured. And I find it odd that the more creative person would be more negative, or maybe are they more negative or just less positive? There's a difference there.
Tit for tat, I guess, on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me go into my reasoning behind this, and then you can fill in the blanks. Because politically, we're on the wrong sides of your screen, because I tend to be a little more left and Heath tends to be a little more right. But brain structure wise, we're on the correct side of your screen, because I'm right brained and he's left brained. So left brain individuals, the more structured ones, tend to be better at noticing the details. And right-brained individuals tend to be better at noticing patterns. So the forest for the trees, left sees the tree more clearly, where right sees the forest more clearly. Okay, so now we can go to Steven Pinker's work and a little bit of Sam Harris. There is more that can go wrong in the world than there is that can go right. The things that can go wrong are more likely than the things that can go right. But if your perspective is on the detail, you see more of the things that went right. Whereas if your perspective is on the pattern, you see more of the things that didn't go right in the world. And so I think that plays into that positive versus negative thinking. If you see a grain of salt, you see the grain, the structured crystal, whereas I see the pile of salt that just goes, right?
That makes sense. Another random thought that just kind of occurred to me is it's kind of a trope, and I wonder how true it is, that more creative types tend to be more mentally unstable. There are plenty of famous anecdotes to that effect of famous artists who were
we can talk about schizophrenia a little bit.
Yeah, who were a bit nutty, the Edgar Allan Poes or the Van Goghs, or
well, we've got great modern examples. Robin Williams, Prince, who else? Name your favorite artist, realistically.
Yeah. And how many examples can we come up with of artists who died young due to overdose?
Well, we were talking about one just in my last session, because I don't know if anybody remembers the 90s song No Rain by Blind Melon. The famous video with the bee girl, right? They were on their first big tour because of that hit, that one hit that they had with a decent album around it, and they were invited to Lollapalooza, their first big outing, and I guess someone introduced him to the good drugs, and he died of an overdose in his Winnebago. Never got to see the stage. So it's that personality type that is prone to that. But yeah, let's stick to topic for a second. It's that right brain versus left brain. It takes a little bit of that detachment from the details to have that creativity. But on the other end, you kind of need to see the trees without seeing all the negative in the world. And that's what I wanted to get at, as we talked about it via characters in a book, but I wanted to go into more details about how it actually works in real life. And when I'm thinking of things, and it's really hard not to be a pessimist, because you start seeing some stuff. Like I watch out my window. Right here is the front road to our neighborhood, and it exits right out to the exit. So it's the last one people go down before they get to the exit, and a lot of people try to cut through here to get to places. And people fly through here at 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. People fly through here at 50, 60 miles an hour all the time. Well, we let our kids play, and they walk across the street to their friend's house, or my kid actually walks to school because it's a block and a half away. And 99 out of 100 people are going to do the right thing. But when it comes to being hit by a car, all it takes is one. All it takes is one, and I've lost my son, or all it takes is one, and I've lost myself. And it's really hard not to go down that path for me, because all I see all day is the pattern of people flying by. Whereas someone else might just be like, well, if he looks both ways and does everything he's supposed to do, then it's going to be okay. So, but yeah, I wanted to kind of throw that in there and tease your brain on that.
Well, and it's interesting you bring up height, because something Height and Peterson, I think, have contributed to recently that needs to be expounded on more and constantly is
this in the debate that had Pinker in it too?
I can't
Where Haidt's
remember.
becoming more of a pessimist and less of an optimist, and Pinker's like, no, you need to be more happy.
No, I'm just thinking back to a few years ago when what was the Haidt book? What was his book about the way left and right politically people think differently, their value structures. I brain farted on the title of that
Righteous
book.
Mind.
Righteous Mind. Yeah. So that book, and then some things Peterson has said about it, is something that book did well that I think was lost, because if you're too partisan, you're going to point and say, see, that's why you're wrong, because you value these other things. And Haidt and Peterson's point was, no, you need both. You need people who think this way, that makes them more left politically. Even if you're on the right and you disagree with their policy prescriptions, you need people who think that way, because you don't, because sometimes you can't, depending on how kind of rigid your mental structure is, sometimes you just can't make yourself think like someone else. Sometimes you can't put yourself in that person's shoes, and you need both the forest and the trees. To your example, when it comes to the left and right brain thinking, is we need both of those kinds of people.
Well, yeah, we can keep on Haidt, because in his book, Happiness Hypothesis, he talks about his experiment with Prozac. And in the chapter, he talks about the three main ways of dealing with people who have issues getting through life. And most of it is that spectrum of right brain, where it is kind of pessimistic and hard to live, because you're prone to depression, you're prone to all these things. And one of them is meditation, but that works for some, but not everybody. One of it is cognitive behavioral therapy, but that works for some and not everybody. And the other is medication, which is, we're going to say Prozac, just like he says in his book, we're going to say Prozac, but it encompasses all of the family of those meds. And that works for some, but not for everybody. But he did with himself. And he was talking about how great he felt mentally, but it had side effects that he couldn't have doing what he does. His memory, he couldn't remember names, he couldn't remember places. He started having a lot of memory problems, which is not good as a professor, right? So he got back off of it, and he was talking about how nice it would be to live in that world. But I would contend to him, the reason why he's great at what he does is because he sees the world the way he does, because he can account for all of these things that ail people, is why he's so good at what he does. Just like I can account for everything that will hurt you in a gym, is why my injury rate is so good when it comes to my clients, because I've already thought it through. I've thought it through probably ad nauseum of how somebody can hurt themselves in any situation, and so we don't do it. And I think that's probably why I have the injury rate that's better than the people who are better at structuring programs. Yeah, there's a template, but not everybody fits in that template. So you kind of organically work your way around it. That's kind of why I wanted to go down there, because I think your point on we need both is, I mean, it's got to be the theme of the day, But yeah, I wanted to talk about that because I thought it was important. We talked about it in our other discussions, and we probably will further today when we go to the Wheel of Time stuff. But just to include some of those topics in our general talks.
Yeah, and now we get to talk about the stupid thing.
Yeah. Oh God. What is it from Friends? Pivot, 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 pivot.
Yeah.
Speaking of negativity, we have to talk a little COVID.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what I was going to bring to this, because I was going to pull up some of Dr. Malone, because he had a so every Saturday, Glenn Beck's podcast is, Monday through Friday, it's his radio show. On Saturday, he does a long form interview with someone, and a couple weeks back, he interviewed Dr. Malone, and Dr. Malone gave the best layperson explanation of what mRNA technology does and why it came about. And
Yeah, go ahead and finish this thought, and then I'm going to preface this whole talk with something we alluded to last time we talked the vid.
so rather than paraphrasing what he said, I was just gonna bring up a minute and a half section of him explaining it.
We can't do that on YouTube.
Well,
it is the doctor to not be mentioned.
Well, exactly. So I thought, well, if his if the podcast is uploaded to YouTube, and so I said, well, let me go just get it, because if it's on YouTube, I'll be able to.
Yeah, but we quoted the CDC before and still had a video.
No, banned. But so that the interview was like an hour and a half long. It was like an hour and a half podcast. On YouTube, it's an 11-minute video. So that's all that's there. His other podcast, he fully uploads those Saturday podcasts to YouTube, not this one. And it says at the beginning, this video has been clipped to meet with YouTube's community guidelines. So an hour and a half podcast was cut down to 11 minutes to meet YouTube's guidelines. So okay. I don't know what the heck I'm going to add to this so that I don't.
Well, I think it's a general theme, because this is going to be a multi-part because I'm on page 7 of a 31-page. Now, I just looked, it's not fully 31 pages. There's a lot of pages of fluff in there, including methods, analysis, and stuff, which I still have to go through, but the actual reading won't be as long. But I forgot to look last night at the declarations of interest, and I just looked at that now. So let's see. SDB, I'm assuming, is Stanford something, because this is a Stanford study, has consulted for Regeneron, Sanofi, Novartis, and Janssen on topics unrelated to the study, and owns stock in Abcelera Biologics. So they got most of their funding from the NIAID, the NIH, NHBI, an environmental agency. Interesting. Advisor to Core Pharmaceuticals, co-founder brands. Okay, so we do have some conflicting interests there. That doesn't throw everything in a study out, but that does have to be noted, since we came across that on the tail end on the last one. But yeah, so they are funded by the NIAID and a bunch of pharmaceutical companies. Now, let me again preface this. We talked about certain YouTube personalities, and you said about clipping to meet YouTube standards. And I brought this up to you in private. Let's pick our words carefully. If anybody, we've talked about patterns in the things that a lot of YouTube personalities will talk about, especially the doctors and MDs, and what they will kind of poo-poo or an ad hominem attack. I had mentioned that it's what will get you demonetized, right? Follow the money. Now, the question also popped forward, again, seeing patterns. Why will it get you demonetized? And we had originally talked about CDC, FDA, and everything, but no, these personalities do contradict the CDC and the FDA and all of the major authorities, even though in the bylaws it says you cannot contradict the authorities, right? The question is, what's the authority?
Yeah.
It's not the CDC, because they contradict them on things like masks and lockdowns and kids in school and stratifying age risk and things that are safe topics. They contradict the CDC and the FDA on that.
Yeah.
What they never contradict is the people who fund all of these things, which are the pharmaceutical companies, who account for something around 73% of ad revenue right now.
Yeah.
So
when you said that, it hit me like a bag of bricks that, oh, duh, it's so obvious. It's stupid, because we have done a number of videos ripping Fauci up and down. Those weren't the ones that get taken down. The one video
when we
that
mentioned a certain
down,
pharmaceutical, yeah.
Well, and it wasn't even so, we've beat around the bush a little bit, but we have talked about um alternative pharmaceuticals, and those didn't even get taken. The one that got taken down was the one that could be seen as making people hesitant because it was critical of,
I mean, it was
to your
snarky.
point, the
It was
authority.
satirical. Yeah, you know,
Yeah,
it was.
certainly in the title.
I will say it was abrasive
Mhm.
the way we did it, but at the same time, it was all true.
Yeah, but to your point, the authority we were attacking, it wasn't Fauci, it wasn't the CDC or the NIH, it was
Because we
the
use their
pharmaceutical
numbers.
companies. Yeah, yeah. As we've been ranting about every time we've mentioned it, every one of the sources that used in that video were off the CDC website. There were CDC studies, but we were using those studies to be critical of the
The
real authority.
distribution, yeah. The again, critical of the mandate itself, not necessarily
Right. But
the fact that it existed.
but in so doing, we were being critical of, to your point, the real authority, which isn't the CDC, it's not Fauci, it's
Which
not the
is
NIH, it's the dollar bills, y'all. Straight
Mhm.
cash, homie.
Well, and realistically, you can go above that to some degree because it's also the major players in the WEF. Because it all goes back to the Gates Foundation. Every bit of this goes back to the Gates Foundation. Everybody talks about Klaus Schwab, but we all know who the real runner of that whole thing is, and that's Bill Gates. So I might have got us canceled just saying that, but we all know who runs the show. It's the Gates Foundation. It's BlackRock. It's Blackstone. It's Nike. Nike's a big part of it. You look at all the division in this country, go back to those companies and see their contribution to all of this, and everything makes sense. But let's get to this article. Now, you sent me an article about the study.
Yeah.
And I purposefully didn't read the article yet because I saw the source and it was more right-leaning source. So I was like, I'll read the study first. Now, we've talked about this before. Some studies are written to be unreadable. This is one of those. Now, I'm still just trying to decide because the topic is so complicated that I'm trying to decide if it's just the fact that it is so complicated or they made it hard to read on purpose. But this has been a dive. And so, like I said, I'm 7 pages in to a 31-page article. I have gotten through the summary, introduction, and mostly through the results. Let me bring that study up. Do I have it queued? Yes. Okay, hopefully that runs smoothly because it was stuttering on me last night. Okay, this is the study. It's in, whoops, cancel. Okay, this is in Cell magazine, so a reputable journal. I forgot to look up if they're paid to publish, but we'll just assume that they're not and they're complete peer reviewed. Immune imprinting, breadth of variation recognition, and germinal center response in human SARS-CoV-2 infection and vaccination. So read that how you will. It's a very vague title. And actually, I'm trying to actually figure out what the main purpose of this study was, because they're all over the place in the things that they're measuring and coming out with. It's like throwing darts at the wall and seeing what hits. But let me find my first highlighted part. I'll link it so people can read what they want. But the main thing you need from this first couple pages is we need some of the abbreviations. Receptor binding domain is RBD. They're going to say that a lot. GC is the germinal center. So those are the things you need from the first page. Then we get down to, and I had trouble again, I'm having trouble with PDFs on my computer. So I highlighted myself and we'll go through this. Let me highlight. Where's it at? 21. Here we go. Okay, so this section right here. The appearance of virus variants, waning antibody levels after infection or vaccination, which they link something there, and breakthrough infections in previously immunized individuals indicate the periodic vaccine boosting of immunity of SARS-CoV-2 is warranted. That statement right there is a very absolute statement based on nothing. Is this the one where I went to the source? No, this was another study. Okay, so I did. So part of the problem that takes so long to get through these is I actually, when I see a statement that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, I go to the source they sourced to make sure that they're actually correctly representing their sources, which is a problem with papers. Someone will make a statement and put a source on it, and they completely misrepresent what the actual study did. And that's the one I got queued up, and I hopefully I put a good enough note to know which one it was. But the appearance of variants, waning antibody levels after infection and vaccination, and breakthrough infections in previously immunized individuals indicate periodic vaccine boosting of immunity to SARS-CoV-2 is warranted. That is not a true statement. They made an absolute statement at the end. Because these things exist, we need to boost. No, that's not how the immune system works, especially if you're boosting with the same damn thing.
I don't remember who it was that I heard make this analogy. I think it may have been Dr. Ryan Cole, so that's probably dangerous, but he made the analogy of we're still vaccinating for the Wuhan strain. That would be like telling a healthcare worker, hey, it's flu season, so you need to get your flu shot. And I've got these leftovers from 5 years ago, so we're going to use those up.
Which again, follow this.
Yeah, it would make absolutely no sense, and the person would rightfully say, no, that's stupid, I'm not going to do that. And here we are.
But again, this is an opinion put into a scientific paper. Because this exists, we need to do this. No, write your paper as this and this and this exists because we looked at these things. Now we as individuals make our choices based on that. You can put in your discussion section, we might recommend this other approach because XYZ reason, it might help with that thing we talked about earlier, but not in the not in the intro or results or any of those sections of the paper. You should be just giving the data. Then we go through that, get down to the results. Where's my next notes on this? Lots of charts and graphs, which are very, actually, these were kind of bulky and unnecessary for what they were talking about. Then we get down to this section here, B&T 162B2, which is what you're still getting, by the way. You're not getting community. If you go get your booster, community is still not available to us, and that's the FDA approved one. You're still getting B&T 162B2, which is the emergency use authorization version, which means they have zero liability.
Which is astounding to me, because my understanding of that law, if there is a FDA approved one, then that should automatically have voided the emergency use authorization.
And yet they're still issuing authorizations for boosters, new authorizations. And so there's so much, again, we're going to try to water down our words a little bit on that, because that's the one thing you're not allowed to talk about. But
yeah, and we do need a legal expert to explain how in the world are they still operating under this authority when by this, that authority is no longer valid.
I think it's something to the degree of the one that is authorized is still not available. But the problem is, when is it going to be available? Do we have a timeline on this? We need these things, public knowledge. When will it be available? Why is it not rolling out to availability? And again, I keep making the dollar signs because they probably have stocks they need to get rid of. They probably overproduced the original one, and they're trying to sell those to not lose money, as if they're not making $100 billion this year. But so the next most important part here, we go down here. I think this is the one I actually, no, it's not. SARS-CoV-2 vaccines and COVID-19 patients showed boosting of SARS-CoV-1 spike antibodies, but infected patients showed greater boosting of spike IgG and IgA for endemic human beta coronaviruses, blah, 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 these two. That statement there, they basically just admit that the naturally infected showed a greater boosting of these two specific antibodies, which contradicts everything else they say in this paper. Then we go down a little bit more. Antibodies to the spike antigens of the endemic, and when they say endemic human alpha coronaviruses, they mean the ongoing, where it's basically something we're going to deal with for the rest of our lives. It's not something we can get rid of at this point. Antibodies to the spike antigens of the endemic human alpha coronaviruses, NL63 and 229E, are not boosted. So not only did they just make a statement that natural gave a greater boosting to these antibodies, they also, just 2 sentences later, said that the booster did not improve the antigens for the endemic coronaviruses. Again, contradicts everything else we're going to see later in this paper. A lot of word salad, until we get to, where is it at? Ah, here we go. Greater Wuhan Hu to variant. Again, that's that binding site. IgG binding ratios were found in weeks 2 to 3 months, month 3 and month 7 in infected patients compared to vaccines. Again, admitting that you had greater immunity at these time points from natural infection than you did from the vaccine. Now, when we get to that sentence I spent an hour on, you're going to understand why I'm bringing all these up. Okay, so now we get down to part of the results here. Come on, scroll. These graphs slow it down a lot. I'm sure Zoom isn't making it happy. Did I pass it? I might have passed it. Yeah, I passed it. I overscrolled.
Is this the infamous sentence that we're coming up to?
No. This is where they start contradicting themselves, though. Okay. Oh, overscrolled again. Here we go. To the bottom of your screen so I don't mess up my scrolling again. Improved IgG binding to viral variants is consistent across 4 COVID-19 vaccines. They list the 4 there, compared to infection. We just read 3 paragraphs that said the opposite of this.
What?
And this is the section where we get to the infamous sentence. So we just read 3 paragraphs that said the opposite of this statement. And now they have a whole section beginning with this statement. And I think the next part is the infamous sentence. Okay, so this graph here is important. B, right there. Okay, here is the infamous sentence, starting with despite here. Despite the different vaccine compositions and magnitudes of antibody responses, all 4 vaccines elicited IgG with relatively greater breadth of viral variant RBD binding compared to that of infected patients, referencing figure 4B. The figure at the top of the screen is 4B, and I'll blow that up here in a second. So that statement translated to English is the vaccines had better effectiveness than the actual viral infection. Okay. we're about to blow this graph up. And this is where myself and my wife, who is a genetic engineer and doctor, spent an hour, and she couldn't see it any differently than I do. And she's very much more left brain than I am. And so we had two different sides of the brain and a lot of expertise across the board staring at this thing, trying to figure it out. And not only that, but we've made plenty of these box graphs ourselves and know how to read them. So let's blow that up. So oh, dang it. The Zoom bar is blocking my ability to blow this up. Hold on. There we go. Did that affect anything on the screen when I moved the Zoom bar?
Nope.
Okay. So I will blow this up to, let's go to 200%. Come on, PDF reader. You can do it. Has it blown up yet? All right, those in the audience, we're going to hang on a second for apparently the PDF reader to, let me stop share, do it, and then come back and see if that helps.
I don't understand how they could. I'm also kind of curious why they even put all that other stuff in there that you went over about the natural infection showing greater antibodies, only to then go down and straight up contradict it later. That is very bizarre.
Let me see. I'm using Brave as my browser. Let me open it in Chrome and see if that works better. No. And this is the thing that blows me away about this. And again, I'm going to read your article after I've done this, because I think I have a feeling they probably teased out a lot of the same things I did, but I didn't want to be influenced by it. I didn't want to have a bias going into reading it. Open with Google Chrome. Let's go. Yeah, that's okay. So apparently Brave is just slower. Brave is supposedly more private. Theoretically, I doubt if I wanted to get into somebody's business, I would tell them it's private. Well, that's slowing down too. Just get what I need so we can show it. Okay, so what I'm going to show you once I can finally get it up is, oh, it got up in Brave. Okay, bravely got up. Okay, so this is 4B, share again. Okay, let me move that again. Okay, so is that clear coming in now? Okay, so let me scroll it down just a hair. Okay, so red is the Wuhan WHO infection, and all the other ones are different forms of the injection, okay? And that box chart is the binding activity. Remember, their statement was that all of the injections elicited greater antibody response than the infection. So in higher is better on the chart, and it all represents the y-axis is binding and IgG binding, okay? So show me on this graph where any single one of them beats the red box. Maybe Kappa there. The Sinopharm beats it on Kappa. Anywhere else, there's a couple that might not be statistically significant, like B15262 there, or even with Alpha, which makes sense because Alpha was the closest to Wuhan strain. So we made the vaccines from Wuhan strain. Show me anywhere on there where that statement is true. And that's what we spent an hour discussing last night, because it doesn't exist. They referenced this chart for their statement and it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a ballsy statement.
Good job, Stanford. But again, I'll finish reading this. I just got stuck on I probably would be done if I didn't get stuck on this chart and statement for so long last night. And then I got frustrated and decided to go out and have a drink and stare at the sky. Because aliens.
Hopefully.
No. No, it just really was frustrating. That's where I'm at as far as this paper. It's hard not to be cynical here, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's they're directly contradicting themselves with the chart right there within view. And it still blows me away. Not to mention the fact that IgG antibodies is only one measure, and it's actually not a great measure at all.
Well, I can't say I'm surprised, but it is pretty brazen. When it's all right there. Now, I thought this was the the study that was showing the spike protein was persistent. Was that a different study?
This is this study as well. That's what I'm
Okay.
saying. I'm trying to figure out exactly what they're studying in this study because they're kind of all over the place. And I'm mostly that was mostly through the results. I've got I did get a little bit further into the lymph node. So the next part of this, after they go through what we just went through, is lymph node impairment with severe SARS-CoV-2 infection, and then the persistence of spike protein in, which they're calling a good thing, and I would love their explanation why. Persistence of spike protein in the lymph nodes from vaccination. And there's not only would I like to see a good reason why that is a good thing, because we do know the spike protein is problematic in and of itself.
Yeah.
That's kind of common knowledge by now, unless you're just not paying attention. But the one of the issues here, and I guess
well, that's a good place to leave it off and tease it for next time. Next time we'll get into the spike protein part of it, which there's more to that we can talk about, to bring to bear on that. Because maybe it's not common knowledge, and maybe there aren't enough people paying attention to know that the spike protein in and of itself is what's causing these
well, and you got to be careful with that, because that's probably a lot of the things, a lot of the reasons Dr. Malone is canceled, because he does talk about that particular thing as why it was probably a little rash to go the direction we went. And so we got to be careful with that. But what my thing about this particular study is unrelated to that. It's how they measured it. We obtained lymph node tissues from 7 COVID-19 patients and 3 control autopsy cases, as well as lymph node core needle biopsies of 7 individuals vaccinated with the mRNA 1273, which I think is Moderna, but don't quote me on that, and BNT 162b2, which is the Pfizer. They've got, first of all, your N is very low, but they took the most severe cases of SARS infection and compared them to 7 random individuals who were injected. And when I hear autopsy cases, I want to know if those autopsy cases were people who died of the severe infection. And of course, you're going to get the worst of the worst and compare it to just random individuals. It's, I mean, I don't even
Odd.
know how to go about that, how to compare it to something in maybe exercise studies or whatever. It would be like taking the stars of the 600-pound person and comparing them to random jogs around the block person and saying, running is the best thing you can do ever.
Hmm.
You know, that's how off this is to me. It's, you know, what about taking that person that just lost their smell and had no other symptoms and comparing their lymph nodes to the other person? I just don't understand the direction they're going here. It's almost like it's hedging the bets is what it is. It's counting cards, stacking the deck, whatever term you want to use. But I haven't finished that section. Yeah, we'll go more into that next time. But it's just, it's frustrating. Again, it's almost impossible to read this thing. But I'll have to go back, and I made a note where I put up the other study, but they completely misrepresented it. It's frustrating. This whole process has been frustrating with COVID, but this specific paper is a great example of why the whole process has been frustrating. Anything you want to add to that before we move on to fun stuff?
Not without going down a deep, dark rabbit hole, which is why I said we should leave it there and tease it for more next time we do COVID talk. And I may unleash the crazy voices then, but just for now, more curiosities that just don't make sense. And there's a lot of that going around.
Yeah, and it's just it's frustrating to me that they basically contradict themselves in their own paper. And that's it's not even in the discussion section. Like, we got these results, but we think this from other data, you know, that would be the proper place for it. And, you know, we talked about it in another episode where you brought up a discussion session and I said, no, that's actually proper language for that, because you should be throwing out all possible things that could have affected your studies and could have been your biases, or maybe your target population was too small in your view, or too broad, or any of the, you should be throwing out those things that could have affected it, because your methods is a roadmap. And this goes back to the other one, the IVM study we went over last time. Your method, the problem is we don't know why those people are missing, right? Your methods is a roadmap for replication. So someone can come in and repeat your study and see if they get the same results. And if we don't have that roadmap, then we can't say we're getting consistent results, because we might have done something different. Right?
Well, consistent results is one. And then to your point that you mentioned last time when we were talking about these kinds of studies in general, is you're narrowing down as much as you can to one particular variable. Okay, well, if we don't know how you get your results, well, then we can't build off of that with another study that narrows down to a different variable, because we don't know what you did. Your study is essentially worthless.
Well, your methods is the roadmap, but the discussion section is the hindsight that you wish you had, right? 2020 hindsight. So you get done with the study and you go, well, damn, we might have done this differently. We might have done this differently, or this could have affected it. So you give them a roadmap, then someone can come in and repeat it, accounting for those things you wish you did. And then we see if we get a similar result or a different result. And if we get a different result, then we could say, oh, those things probably did affect it. And so now, like you said, you used the word build. Now we've built on that knowledge. Knowledge is always building. It's never just, yes, we know this. We could say things with pretty good confidence, but we always need to be building on that. And that's what these people should be doing. And you need a clear roadmap, which we didn't get in that other study. But you also, the discussion session is where we go over these things. It shouldn't be in the methods. It shouldn't be in the results. We shouldn't get your opinion on that. You should just give me the data. And don't contradict yourself, because you referenced the chart I'm looking at that showed me the exact opposite of what you said. So it's I don't know how this survived peer review, first of all. So maybe I should check Cell Magazine if they're a pay for publication. I don't know
That
if
would be
they.
interesting. Well, that's a good place to pause briefly, and then we'll start part 2 to talk about things that don't hurt our brain quite so much.
Okay, for those that follow us on everything, we're about to do Wheel of Time, get into that. For those that just follow for the COVID and health related stuff, we'll see you next time. Disclaimers: we didn't give any medical advice. We did not say whether to get or not get certain pharmaceuticals. We did not recommend any treatments. We just read a study and talked about what we liked and didn't like about it. For entertainment purposes only is the disclaimer, I guess. Hopefully you were entertained. Any other disclaimers we should add to that?
Nope.
Nope. All right. We'll see you next time, or see you in a couple minutes.